Yeah, I haven't done Alice in Chains for a bit, but I've had this on my computer for ages as well. Alice in Chains, Layne Staley's final days with Jerry Cantrell and the band. So yeah, let's go.
I've covered a lot of Alice in Chains videos on my channel, including their glam days, the making of facelift, Jar of Flies, Sap, as well as the song Rooster. The links to those videos are down below. But today, let's take a look at frontman Layne Staley's final days with the band in the studio. Alice in Chains would establish themselves as the first band out of Seattle's so-called grunge movement to have a gold record with Facelift. They would release several big records during the 90s, including their follow-up Dirt, 1994's EP Jar of Flies, and 1995's self-titled record that would prove to be their final studio album of original recordings. Addiction and infighting led the band to stop touring in any major capacity by 1993. Frontman Layne Staley's addiction to heroin would be the group's Achilles heel, and it wasn't something that the singer really hid. A lot of the group's 1992 album Dirt captured Layne's struggle, as did their 1995 self-titled record. The band's last major appearance on the road would be in 1996, a year that saw the band briefly open for Kiss on their reunion tour, and make a few live TV appearances in addition to cutting an unplugged album for MTV. It was obvious from Layne's changing physical appearance by 1996 that he was struggling with addiction. Following that summer, Alice in Chains' camp would lie dormant, and Layne would be hit with devastating news in October of that year when he learned that his ex-fiancée, Demery Parrott, had died. It was said by those close to him that he never fully recovered from her death. It was during this time there'd be the odd news story about someone running into Layne, a lot of which is captured in the book Everybody Loves Our Town and Grunge is Dead. Even MTV reported in August of 1997 that there were rumors circulating online for nearly a year, and on radio stations that Layne had lost several fingers to gangrene. The rumors likely stemmed from a 1996 profile that Rolling Stone did on the band that highlighted his personal problems with drugs. A rep for the band would issue a statement to MTV that read at the time, "I visited Layne the other day and he's fine, and he's got all his fingers." In October of 1997, the band's manager, Susan Silver, would appear at the North by Northwest Music and Media Conference, and the Seattle Times would report that, and I quote, "She hinted with a sigh that Alice is about to self-destruct." It was during this time Silver would close her management business as well. By late 1997, reports were starting to surface that guitarist Jerry Cantrell was now turning his attention to putting out a solo record. It's important to note that some of the tracks on Cantrell's solo record Boggy Depot consisted of 3/4 of Alice in Chains minus Layne Staley. Of course, as Cantrell started doing press for his solo effort, which would be released in April of 1998, the question of Alice in Chains' inactivity continually came up, in addition to questions about Layne's health. He would be asked about the band's inactivity in February of 1998, telling MTV, "Well, there's really nothing up with Alice in Chains. We've been together for 11 years now, and we've done a lot of great music together and accomplished a lot of things, and that's very special to me. But there also comes a point in the life of any band, I think, that it's time to change and time to try new things." Here's another interview Jerry did with Much Music, and you can tell he's pretty annoyed when questions about Layne's health come up.
McKinley.
Layne Staley, okay.
He's fine.
He is?
Yeah,
Good.
he's fine.
Right on. And
Jesus.
I had to, like,
Yeah, I know.
you might as well say it up front.
It's just very funny every time I get that question, you know. Like I think I'm supposed to get some sort of status report on it. No, he's fine. He's probably home recording a song right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
So he's better than ever?
Actually, he's conditioning himself for the Nagano Olympics.
According to MTV News, it was around this time that Columbia Records, the band's label, had taken out ads in Billboard magazine touting a new box set called Men in the Box, but the band would deny that anything new was on the horizon, calling the ad, and I quote, premature. Jerry would assemble a solo band that included himself and his Alice bandmate drummer Sean Kinney to tour in the summer of 1998, opening for Metallica and playing alongside Days of the New. Side note, guys, I've done a whole video on Days of the New, the link is down below. Cantrell would reveal to Pop Matters that it was during his time on the road that he started to write music for a second solo album, Degradation Trip, and that included a track called Get Born Again. But his Alice in Chains bandmates, including Layne, took a liking to the song. Then in August of 1998, producer David Jordan, who produced both Facelift and Dirt, got a call that Alice in Chains wanted some studio time to record a few new songs for an upcoming box set, The Music Bank. Jordan at the time was working in his El Dorado studios with The Offspring, recording their record Americana. The Offspring, who were signed to the same label as Alice at the time, allowed Alice to use the studio. But due to the tight scheduling, the guys in Alice in Chains could only come in for one weekend, and that was on August 22nd and 23rd, and there would be foreshadowing of what would happen. Jordan, for his part, had a falling out with Alice in Chains during the making of Dirt, confronting Layne about his escalating drug use, hence why he didn't work on their follow-up releases Jar of Flies, or their self-titled album in 1995 with the job going to producer Toby Wright. Wright would also work with Jerry on a solo record. In addition to seeing a familiar face with Jordan, Dirt engineer Brian Karlstrom was also in the studio at this time, but he was exhausted from pulling long days with The Offspring. Based on Jordan's conversation with Alice's manager, the idea was that each of the 2 days in the studio would be used to record, overdub, and mix one song. Things didn't exactly go to plan. While Jerry, Sean, and Mike from Alice showed up in the morning of August 22nd and recorded their parts fairly quickly, Layne wouldn't show up until sometime after midnight. Karlstrom was shocked at Layne's appearance, recalling in the book Alice in Chains: The Untold Story. Layne showed up in the studio and I didn't recognize him. He looked like an 80-year-old man. He didn't have any teeth. I was shocked to say the least. A studio runner and assistant engineer named Layne Trujillo, who Jordan mentored at the time, shared a similar sentiment, recalling in the same book. When Layne came in, we were all shocked because Layne definitely didn't look how he used to. He had obviously been really affected by substance abuse at that point. It was really sad. I was really heartbroken. But despite Layne's change in appearance, his humor and wit were still there, according to those who took part in the recording session. Layne would spend time in and out of the bathroom, nodding off on the couch, and August 22nd happened to be his 31st birthday. Trujillo had arranged for a cake to be brought into the studio, and everyone would sing Layne happy birthday and give him a card. It was now 5 a.m. in the morning, and Layne wanted to continue to work, but the studio staff and the band were exhausted and wanted to come back the following day. But Layne claimed he had to go back home to Seattle for his sister's wedding. Author David DeSola, who wrote Alice in Chains: The Untold Story, did a check for Layne's sister's marriage certificate and found that there was no license for that weekend, as his sister had gotten married earlier in the year and Layne was not present at the ceremony. Jordan suspected that Layne wanted to go back to Seattle to score. DeSola would write in his book what happened next between Jerry and Layne, with Jerry yelling Layne's name in an exasperated tone of voice, with him writing, "Layne turned into this little kid that had been reprimanded severely by his parents. It was one of the strangest things I ever saw, how Jerry wasn't putting up with Layne's BS anymore, and Layne, who had such a strong personality, completely turned into nothing. He wasn't crying, but he looked like he was about to cry. Layne acted like he was afraid, terrified of Jerry." The studio sessions would be suspended for the time being, with no vocals being recorded, and the tension in the studio soon leaked to Rolling Stone magazine, who wrote up an article on September 4th, 1998 titled Malice in Chains. The article, mostly citing Jordan, created some bad blood between the producer and Alice's camp, and Jordan would recall to Rolling Stone how Layne, and I quote, "weighed 80 pounds and was white as a ghost," with Jordan adding, "It's 1 o'clock in the morning and Jerry and Layne were having problems on one song because Jerry was mad because Layne was changing the melody and lyrics. So in the middle of the mess, I'm supposed to go, let's stay here all effing night." According to Jordan, Staley told Cantrell, "I've never effing used your lyrics, I'm not about to." But the guitarist would shoot back against these accusations and Jordan's recollection, telling the magazine, "If you look at any of our discs, I mean, Layne sang a lot of my lyrics and I sang a lot of his. It's not like one guy's writing all his shit." In the same article, the band's manager Susan Silver would slam Jordan for leaking details of the session to the magazine, stating, "I'm sickened by the fact that Dave would try and lay blame on everyone around him for something that he was so clearly responsible for. All this from a professional who's received many benefits from his previous association with Alice in Chains. He should be ashamed. His lack of respect is disgraceful." Following the failed sessions, Jordan tried to set up some studio time in Seattle for early September for Layne to finish up his vocals, but he would soon be informed that Layne didn't want to work with the producer anymore. Layne would end up finishing up his vocal tracks with producer Toby Wright, and due to the tensions between Jerry and Layne at the time, they had to be in the studio at different times, with Wright recalling to David DeSola, "Those two songs required a lot of Pro Tool editing because Layne would do something, he'd go home, Jerry would come in and hear what he did, and he'd change it again. So it was a lot of digital manipulation." Wright would attribute the heavy use of Pro Tools to the fact that Layne was missing teeth, something which affected his singing ability. According to Wright, he tried to encourage Layne not to write lyrics that highlighted the singer's lisp, and the two resulting songs would be Get Born Again and Died, which would be the final two songs Layne recorded with the band. Both songs would be included as part of Alice in Chains' Music Bank box set, with Get Born Again being released as a single, and a video would be shot for the song as well. The video for Get Born Again wouldn't use any current footage of the band due to Layne's appearance, and instead used a compilation of their old videos. The single would peak at number 4 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts, and Layne would reveal to Rockline that the song was about religious hypocrisy. The song Died, meanwhile, would be written about Layne's former fiancée Demery. In the liner note of the Music Bank box set, Jerry would write about Died. I wish we'd have gotten a bit more time to work on that one. It's more Alice in a Jam Room. It's not as finished as Born Again. It's vicious, it's got teeth, it doesn't have many overdubs, and it's maybe a pure, raw form of what Alice is. It isn't pretty, and that's not a bad thing at all, he'd write. Layne would continue to be in seclusion in the years that followed, and he would pass away in April of 2002 due to a drug overdose. He was only 34 years old. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.
It is terrible, really, because it shows you how powerful a thing heroin is, how powerful that addiction is. Because he's like good looking boy, got everything, and yeah, he's lying about, which is typical junkie behavior, but lying about his sister's wedding. Yeah, it's tragic, and he had no teeth, and yeah, that truly is tragic. Because he's such a talent as well. He's like his voice in his day. And yeah, it's crazy that basically heroin did that. Yeah, it is sad. I have to listen to that. Died. And what was the other one? Get Born Again. Which is kind of, that's almost, there's a certain poetry to that. That's the last songs he recorded with him. Was his Get Born Again and Died. That's almost like a prophetic thing, a prophecy type thing. But yeah, tragic, no, tragic. But that's the reaction. Sweet.